and I lived in Japan as a child.
Pamela, thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you very much
Really
for having
appreciate
me.
it. Now, we met that was at Norm Green's 100th birthday.
Birthday, yes.
Yeah, he's turning 100 years old.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Amazing.
Seeing you there. Now, you work at the embassy, right?
Yes.
Okay, tell me what you do at the embassy.
So at the embassy, I work for our Trade and Economic Policy Unit, which handles all of the bilateral trade between the U.S. and Japan. And I should add, first, everything I say is in my personal capacity here, not in my professional job at the embassy, not speaking on official record today. So, you know, the U.S. and Japan are the #1 investors in each other's countries, and so our economic relationship is so deep, so we work to try to keep that on track.
How long have you been here in Japan?
This is starting my 5th year, so 4.5 years so far. This time, and I lived in Japan as a child. So
Where did you live?
in Tokyo. And actually, I took gymnastics with you when I was in middle school in 1989 to 93.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, not kidding. I went to ASIJ as a kid. My dad worked for a software startup and my mom for Bristol Myers Squibb here in Tokyo.
No, what grade were you in?
I was in 5th through 8th grade.
So who was your teacher? You remember your teacher then?
Well, at ASIJ, I think my 5th grade teacher was Miss Daly, but I went over to Nishimachi to take your gymnastics class in the afternoons
Then
after
I should
school.
have you. Then I should have you. If you were at ASIJ and I was your PE teacher at ASIJ.
No, just after school at Nishimachi.
Oh, after school Nishimachi. Because what year were you talking about?
89 to 93.
Oh, I wasn't there because
Yeah, you had already finished and switched.
Right, because I taught at 89. You said when?
89 to 93.
Okay, no, I was in the scanner business then. But I still had my gymnastics program. And I was the one teaching?
Yes, with, I think her name was Miss Hiroko.
Hiroko.
Yeah.
Well, then I came in to teach every now and then because what happened then, Hiroko had about 25 people working for her.
Yep.
And I would come in and maybe help
Yep.
every now and then.
We were, I was trying to learn how to do a kip on the bars.
Is that right?
Yes, that was one thing I remember you helping me with back in the day.
Interesting. And I'm running into people all the time, and that's one thing I like about being an expat.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters where you are in the world. You're going to run into people that you've known if you've been an expat for a while.
Yeah, you know, my oldest son is realizing that he's a senior at St. Mary's. He's not me, so he went to a different school. As much as I thought ASIJ would be great, St. Mary's was a better fit for him. But you know, he has been at these international school basketball and volleyball track competitions, and he's like, I'm always like one connection removed from somebody that I meet at those track meets. It's pretty fascinating.
It's a beautiful life, but I think when you have a life like that, it changes how you deal with people that are local.
Yes.
Or domestic, domestic in their area, because you're thinking differently.
Very differently. Because you're constantly making friends and meeting new people, and you have to figure out how you fit in with people who are there for long term and have an investment in their community for a generation, a decade.
That's right.
When, especially for the embassy, we're usually on a 3-year rotation. I'm on a little bit of a different cycle because of my son graduating. But yeah, we're in and out, and you want to make a positive impact while you're there and leave a place maybe better than when you started.
When you first came here, you said you were a little girl when you first came here.
Yeah.
And you stayed here for how long?
We were here for 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
Now, had you traveled prior to that?
No, my family had grown up in Connecticut. My dad actually, my mom is his second wife, and so he had made a commitment to stay in Connecticut with his kids from his first marriage until the oldest was 18.
Okay, are you close with them?
Yes, very actually. We had lunch or dinner once a week while we were growing up, and my 2 brothers each lived with us for a year, so we're 7 kids all together.
Ooh. Your father's Catholic?
No, I asked him this when I was 16, why he had 7 children, and he said he just likes making them, which was very embarrassing to a 16-year-old.
Why would it be embarrassing? How's your mom and dad doing?
Well, my father passed away this last summer.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry to hear
it's
that.
okay. He lived a really full life, and my mother's now in Maryland, near her 2 step-kids and my sister, who are also in Maryland.
So your father just had you and your sister?
No, we had one younger one. So three of us moved here to Japan with my dad. Yeah.
Were they all girls?
All girls.
All
yeah,
girls.
Sanshimai, as they say in
Sanshimai.
Japanese.
Wow, that's beautiful. And your
Yeah.
father worked for who?
He worked
Bristol
for
Myers?
a software startup called Continuum.
Okay.
And we were actually TAC members when I was little. And that company has since been acquired a few times. CSC is now the owner of what was that startup in the 1980s from Austin, Texas.
What made you decide to go into economics?
So that's a really interesting question. I studied Japanese in college. You know, that had a large impact on my life. And my Japanese teacher at Wellesley College really wanted me to do my PhD. But I had just had enough, you know. And so then I was like, you know, I can't do this much Japanese. And I had had a summer job as an interpreter and translator. And I didn't really like only saying other people's ideas. You know, I had my own ideas.
Right.
And so then I was like, you know, if I'm not going to continue this Japanese skill that I've built up, I might as well just make some money, right? You're 22, you got to start somewhere. So I worked for a small...
Now, where were you at this time?
So I was at Wellesley College in Boston, and
Okay.
through on-campus recruiting, got a job for a consulting company in DC called Dean & Company. And that was really great. And I tell a lot of like young people, there's nothing wrong with kind of selling your soul to the man when you first graduate, getting yourself on good footing.
Right.
You know, I was able to buy a condo at 25 in DC.
Okay.
My husband and I got married when we were 23 and, you know, sort of very young.
You're both the same age then?
Yeah, we went to the same high school actually in Texas. So when...
Okay, what does he do? Is he in economics as well?
So after, I'll get to that in a
Okay,
second.
sure.
After I made some money, and after about 4 or 5 years, I was like, you know, I need something that fulfills me a little bit more than just making money. So I decided to go back to graduate school and didn't want to go to business school, even though that would have been a natural transition, and instead went to Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies to study economics in Japan. So that's, and through that process did a number of internships with the State Department, with a think tank, also taught some classes on basic business school skills to my fellow classmates. The career services hired me, like how to use Excel and PowerPoint. Right. And then took the Foreign Service Officer exam there and decided, since I had studied economics was the way to go.
Okay, now how did you maneuver yourself through all of that? I'm just wondering, was it did you have contacts through your parents, your mother, father, or?
So the first job was really just on-campus recruiting.
Okay.
And they came to Wellesley because their previous 2 classes had been pretty heavily male-dominated for their new hires.
Okay.
Wellesley's a women's college, so they're like, if we need more women, we might as well go to a women's college where we know 100% of the people we interview are going to be women.
Right.
And then a year in, I asked them, like, why did you choose to interview me? You know, I studied Japanese, and they said, well, you had a minor in math, and we were just curious, what kind of person majors in Japanese and minors in math? Like, we figured, if nothing else, you'd be an interesting interview. And I guess I did well enough on the interview and passed. And
what made you decide to go to a women's college?
So that was that was a compromise actually between me and my dad. He graduated from Princeton, and I was waitlisted at Princeton. And he really wanted me to push to go there because he was so excited that one of his kids was actually interested to apply there. You know, the older ones, they all...
None of his first
None of them
kids
applied.
wanted to.
No, my oldest brother did engineering. He is just retired from NASA. My second sister did computer science, and she's, I think, currently working on a contract with Microsoft or directly, I'm not sure. My third sister did her PhD in philosophy, my second sister, sorry, PhD in philosophy. My brother's a firefighter in Petaluma, California. Okay. I'm a diplomat. Then there's a doctor and a musician.
Your dad did, wait, your mother's and your dad
yes.
did well.
So well.
He picked well. He
yeah.
knew his,
so we all followed our passion.
Do you know what his first wife did?
She was a nurse. Yeah.
And your mother?
And my mother was a computer programmer. She finished her first career at Dell and then, you know, retired and then came back to work a few times.
Did your father come from a big family or a small family?
4 kids, not terrible.
4 kids. Where's he ranking there?
He's the first. And my grandpa his father worked for GE his whole life.
Did you know his father?
Yes, yeah, he actually died September 10th, 2001. So, you know, the next day when I came to work to say my grandfather had died, since I was in DC at that time, everybody assumed it was with the unfortunate attacks, but no, he just died of heart attack at old age. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you decided to go to Wellesley as a compromise.
Yeah, as a
with your
compromise
father.
because I wanted a small liberal arts college, and I had applied to a few. And my dad, being of the generation he was, you know, when Princeton was all men, then there were the Seven Sisters, and so he saw me going to Wellesley as sort of an equivalency, I guess you could say.
Right.
And so that was kind of the compromise. It wasn't because it was a women's college, but it turned out to be a really wonderful experience. And I've been surprised in Tokyo with my oldest son at St. Mary's, seeing the same benefits of single-sex education for him at St. Mary's.
You think it makes a difference?
I think it does. Like, I mean, co-ed education is great and it works for a lot of people, and maybe it's better for some, but for some people, you know, if you can focus on the academics without the social pressures.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that 100%. But not having ever done that, I made sure my sons got what I had.
Yeah.
'Cause that's all I could associate.
That's all you
I
can
could relate
assume.
to. I could
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
And I didn't do the all-boys schools because it has its pluses and its minuses
Yeah, you
too.
have to, you know, I have people ask me a lot about like toxic masculinity and concerns about that, but you know, for my son, he's been able to really explore his art side. He's a really sporty kid, but he did the bell choir for 3 years, and he said he'd never be able to do that if it hadn't been for like only boys can do things. And that's how a lot of women feel at women's colleges, right? Like they might not run for leadership positions, but only women are there to run things.
Right.
So yeah, it goes both ways
That's
if you create the right atmosphere.
But very interesting because I'm listening to you talking about all female schools versus all boys schools, and I do think it makes a difference, and I think that we've clouded it with too much emphasis on some other things, like you said, toxic masculinity.
Yes.
I don't believe in that. I think you're masculine or you're not, but you're still masculine. You can either be. There's different stages.
Well, there's different
within
degrees,
that.
and
Different
you know,
degrees.
my middle son, he's really interested now in this whole debate about transgender.
That thing, yeah.
You know, and I know that's a lot of people feel very strongly about that, and that's completely their choice.
That's
but
right.
and we support people whoever they are. But it really brings some interesting questions.
Does he go to St. Mary as well?
No, my younger two are at Montessori School of Tokyo. So when we lived in Vietnam, they were at a Montessori school there for 1st and 3rd grade. And then we moved here, and the Montessori school here goes up till 9th grade. So we kept with the alternative education for them. Yeah, it's a very different
Are
approach.
they teaching that to him in school?
No, he's just reading about it on his own.
On his own.
Yeah.
What about your oldest?
My oldest, they do have health class, and you know, they read articles and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you know, each child just needs to make their choice, but we shouldn't, like, if you're a woman but enjoy traditionally masculine things, there's nothing wrong with that.
We used to call those girls tomboys.
Yeah, and same with boys who enjoy girls things.
If
you want to switch, that's also fine.
Sissies.
But anyway, that both of those are pejorative. But you know, and switching is fine.
True.
But you know, like the whole continuum,
Right.
I think. Yeah, and I think just the transgender question is really interesting when it comes to the single-sex education debate.
I think so. Yeah,
And I don't know. I mean, we'll see how women's colleges or boys' schools, you know, if they decide to stay single sex or not.
So you decided to get into finance.
Anyway, so I decided.
You decided to make money.
I decided to make money. Then, you know, had this series of different internships and decided, you know, maybe the economics within the State Department could kind of fit this interest that I have with how the economy works and a desire for public service or, you know, serving people, and through that we had my husband and I had a funny conversation. He was like, well, what am I going to do if we're moving around the world every couple years for your job?
So you had to sit down and say, okay, my job, but you hadn't picked your job yet.
No, I hadn't even passed the exam yet.
But wait, you applied for this?
So it's a 3-step process. You apply, then there's an essay, and then you do an interview.
Right.
And so we were just at the application test phase. And I said, well, you know, you could either become a house husband, because this was like 2006.
How many kids did you have already?
We had 0,
Okay,
but
0.
planning on them.
Right.
I was like, or you could take the exam with me and see where it goes. And so he took the exam too, and passed also. And we both took the interview on the same day, but in different locations, you know, to not have like nepotism or anything like that.
Right.
And we both passed the interview.
So he's also part of it?
So he's also with the Foreign Service, yeah.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've been doing this for, actually, this Monday was our 17th anniversary for joining the
so
State
sometimes
Department.
you pick, you say, okay, this time I'm going to, wait, how do you do it? 'Cause
Oh.
do they always automatically send you
They
together?
don't, it's up to us.
Okay.
So the State Department publishes lists of all the jobs, and
Okay.
then we go to the hiring managers and, you know, have to use our lobbying skills and
See if you
things
can
like
get your
that
spouse
to
come
try
with
to
you.
get, convince an embassy that they want to hire us as a package,
Okay.
package deal. So we've been in India, Manila, Vietnam, Tokyo, and Washington, D.C. twice.
What's his experience growing up?
So he grew up mostly in Texas. He was born there. His dad worked for Southwestern Bell. Actually, both his parents did until he was born. And then his mom, she was supposed to go back to work, but at the last day just decided, you know, it wasn't her calling.
Okay.
She couldn't be the mom she wanted to be and
Right.
the employee she wanted to be. She had to choose one or the other, and the baby's there, right? So she's done a wonderful job too, obviously. I mean, I think her
Obviously,
husband's
I mean,
fantastic, right?
Yeah. You can tell that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep, thank you, Karen. You know, she's a wonderful person.
That's wonderful.
And so he's grown up mostly in Texas. They moved a little bit to St. Louis and Boston too for his dad's job. And when he was in high school, his dad took a job with Southwestern Bell in South Africa, Johannesburg. They had bought a controlling stake, or they had bought a stake in telecom South Africa. So he went there to help with, you know, developing the telecom sector in South Africa. So he had a little bit of that overseas
Wait,
experience.
You mean, who bought it? Your husband's father? Or
No,
you
no,
mean
no.
the company he worked
the
for?
company
Okay,
he worked
okay.
for. Yeah,
Right.
they took a share in telecom
Okay.
South Africa. You know, just as that was 97. So
And he spent some time there.
4 years they were there. My
But
husband's
what
parents.
age was? What age?
My husband was in college, but he spent
Okay.
summers there.
Oh, that's neat. So this is his first time really leaving outside the United States.
He had gone to
Southern.
Germany on a scholarship for a summer program in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, that was like after his junior year of high
So
school.
he did
I
have the
think.
bug. He wanted.
Yeah,
to,
he had a
wanted to-
bug.
He had the
Yeah.
bug. He wanted to get around. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how we both took the exam and ended up where we are. And when I finished graduate school, I also had an offer from Deloitte to work with their transfer pricing team. Again, that economics, you know, international math thing. And so I asked my husband, I was like, okay, we just spent like tens and thousands of dollars for my master's. Like, what are we going to do? Am I going to go work for Deloitte in Chicago? Or am I going to go, like, are we going to join the State Department? And you'd think it'd be a momentous occasion, but he was like, you know, Pam, Deloitte's always going to be there. Like, why don't we try the State Department? If we don't like it, we could go back and try Deloitte in Chicago. And I was like, that seems like a reasonable way to make this choice. So yeah, so we joined the State Department, and we haven't gone back to Deloitte in Chicago.
Because they won't send you around. They won't move you around like you'll be
Yeah, I
moved
know.
now.
So we've been lucky with, you know, getting our jobs together and lining up. And Tokyo's been interesting because after COVID, we've been experimenting in the government. It doesn't happen often, but it does, with certain positions being telework accessible.
You were here during COVID.
We were here during COVID.
That's right. You just got here, I guess.
Yeah, so we came
You mean
in
20?
July 2020.
Yes,
It was
yeah,
the
you just
height
got
of
here.
COVID. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, nobody was coming to Japan.
I was going to say, and how'd they move? Well, it was just,
It was
they didn't know if it was
just
going to be a year.
diplomats.
They didn't know if it was going to be, how long it was going to
yeah,
be.
that summer they allowed diplomats and I believe international school teachers
To come, right.
So business people, I
Right,
think,
they were
had to
very
wait a
strict
year
here.
and
They
a
were
half.
very
They were
strict
so
here.
strict. That was one of our
were.
main things we were talking about with Japan at that time
My goodness.
on the econ side.
So you deal a lot with the ACCJ then, don't
Yes.
you?
Yes, we a number of committees that I mostly work with the Government Relations Committee. That's sort of my link committee from the embassy. We have liaisons assigned to each committee, But talk with the ACCJ on a variety of things. So looking forward to their Shinnan Kai. I think it's the week after next, the 23rd maybe.
Right, they've stopped the ball though.
Yeah.
They used to have a ball all the time.
Yeah.
I heard this is the first time, I guess, they've decided to stop it. I'm not involved with the chamber, so I don't know why they're. I mean, I don't know much about it. I just hear these things. From
Yeah,
outside.
I feel like it has to be responsive to the members' needs.
I would think so. So it obviously,
you know, if members weren't wanting it, then I guess it wasn't.
That's what
wasn't
you'd
the
assume.
right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not always the case, but you'd like to assume that's it.
Yeah. Well,
But I only hear
that's
from the
what
people.
I assume.
I hear from the people that wanted it.
Yeah, and I think, you know,
Those old
COVID was
timers.
a big disruptor, right?
It
you
changed
know,
a lot of
changed
things.
so many things, and how we all interact with each other, and what's good to go online.
And how we dress.
Yes, how we dress.
Right.
What's good to go online.
Because I started this podcast during COVID.
Oh, a way to connect to people.
And I was wearing nothing but Lululemon.
Now you're here in a suit.
And because I thought, after I looked at a couple, I think the first 2 years, I started thinking I'm not giving respect to the people I'm interviewing. And I need to show respect without saying anything.
Right.
And to wear a suit would do that.
Right.
And also it's my era too, because of my age and everything
Yeah.
else. This is where I've spent more time doing this than not.
Right.
COVID was just a blip. But for younger people, your age and younger, COVID became their identity. You can do it from home. You don't have to really be here. That's what you're told. I was never told that. You had to be there.
And, you know, it was really
And
interesting.
technology too is
Technology
changing.
too has changed, but, you know, we've been coming back to the office. So, you know, Americans at the embassy had to return full time very quickly, because the position was, if you can do your job from home, we can do your job from Washington where it's cheaper. Right? They don't have to give the housing allowance, the school allowance,
That's
right?
right, that's right.
So they said, Americans, you are back at the embassy, or, you know, you do your job from DC.
Right.
We all liked our jobs overseas. We came back to the embassy, you know, and local staff, each embassy and each section got to decide what was
How much they needed.
appropriate. And from the Japanese staff, you know, a lot of them have an hour plus commute, like is pretty common in Tokyo, and they were a little hesitant to come back. So you had to find a reason to make it worthwhile to come back. And it turns out brainstorming in person about how to approach problems
That's good.
is
It's much better than it
much
is
better
on a screen.
On the screen, you can do it. People are so much more willing to say their opinion when they're in person, I found.
Well, they're completely invested too.
Yeah.
Because if you're watching a screen, they might have nothing on underneath.
They
You know
might.
what I mean? They
They
might have
might
their
not.
pajamas down here
Yep.
and just a jacket up here.
Yep.
They're not fully invested. But if they come in person,
Yep.
they're fully invested.
Yep, yep.
That's
So making
interesting.
sure that we built in time for people to communicate and getting out of the habit of just texting each other even when we're in the same office. That was important to like create that team atmosphere, at least for my team.
Well, do you do more texting now? Even if they come in now, you still
Yeah,
text.
so now we do hybrid. So, you know, each Japanese staff member on my team has a day or two. They could potentially work from home if they wanted to, but if we have in-person meetings scheduled, you know, it's a luxury, I guess you could say, rather than a requirement.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yeah.
So you decided to go into the finance. You decided to follow your husband or you? Which one you were going to decide to follow?
Yeah, so my
how do you do
idea to
that?
join the Foreign Service, and then it kind of becomes a joint negotiation for what country we're going to. And we ended up with a East Asia focus because I had 3 bucket list items I wanted to do in the State Department. One was open up a new location. And that was because one of the things I enjoyed in my consulting career was when we were working with startups. Super fun. And so, you know, my husband and I assumed that would mean like Pyongyang or Tehran.
Right.
Turns out we open new consulates all the time. And our very first assignment, we opened up a new consulate in Hyderabad, India. And so we got to go there, you know, before services were open, like 19 Americans into this new city that...
Okay, wait, so tell me how that goes. Can you talk about how
Yeah,
that works?
yeah,
How does
yeah.
that work? How do you do that?
So there was a group that went first that was just 2 or 3 people to like do the logistics, right? Find the location where, first there was, I'm sure, years of negotiation
Right.
between the 2 governments
Right.
about approving more diplomats to come. That takes forever because of the special status. But once, you know, the governments agree, they're going to open up a new location. They send a logistics team in. You have to find a place to operate. And in India, visa demand is very high, so it has to be a place that can process a lot of people for the visa interviews. And then, once that's all set up, the logistics, then they look at the people coming in, and they're like, okay, here are the skills we need. We need a consul general, that's a senior person. We need a management officer to like manage the finances and the HR, public diplomacy person to do that public outreach, and then that's a consulate. So the main functions were visas and American citizen services. So we had 9 new hires to the State Department who were all doing the visa interviews. We were a really good team.
You have to do that first, right?
Yeah, everybody does that first. It's a great introduction.
Right.
And actually, my husband and I learned Telugu, a language spoken in Hyderabad.
Oh, yes, I've heard that.
Yeah,
yes,
we actually,
You learned Telugu enough to communicate?
Oh yeah, I was doing 100 visa interviews a day in that language. And
how long did it take you to learn?
We had 8 months of intensive study, 8 hours a day. Full-time job for 8 months.
I've heard that's how they do it at the embassy, right?
Yep.
And same in the military.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was a really fascinating experience to learn a language most people have never heard of. Actually, kind of stressful.
And how often do you get to use it?
Well, after those 2 years, I don't really use it.
There's no place to use it.
Sometimes my husband and I just have we're like, yalla, like, let's go, or, and it's funny, the words that, they train you in the State Department, not just for visa interviews, but for a wide variety of topics. So, I still remember the word for nuclear agreement, anu opandam. Why do I still remember that word?
Right.
But that was, part of our curriculum as a diplomat to understand how to talk about nuclear issues.
Right. So you did that. So how long did you stay there?
We were there for 2 years. My second son was actually
what is
born
it able
there.
to do? What is it able to? Your second son was born there.
Yeah, he was born there.
Wait, so you're pregnant during all? Wait, so you're pregnant part of this time? Half the time there, you're pregnant.
Yep. And then at that time,
did you worry about, because where's it located? Where's
so if India's here, it's right in the middle, just north of Bangalore. There's 17 million people in the city, so not really.
That doesn't mean a whole lot. But what is it economically?
So it was sort of the second city after Bangalore where a lot of the high-tech companies were doing for their back office processing. Right. So that's kind of why we were there. It was either Bangalore or Hyderabad. That was the choice for the consulate.
Because I've been to India. I've been to India twice, but did not get out of the airport because of the time I went.
Yeah,
they had beggars in the airport, and I said, I can't do this, and I didn't know anyone.
It's so different from Japan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually going to
now
New Delhi
everything's
next.
Different now because everything's become homogenized almost in a way, the world.
Yeah, there's Starbucks in Hyderabad now.
You know what I mean?
There wasn't a Starbucks when I was there.
There was no such thing. There was no Starbucks.
Yeah.
I went in the 70s, so there was nothing.
This was we were there in 2008 to 10.
Yeah, it's completely different now.
Yeah.
So my images are different because you were always worried if you went to India, if you drank the water or put anything in your mouth, you could possibly get.
I think you still drink bottled water when you go.
You still have to.
Yeah, I think
so. How do you feel being pregnant while you were there?
You just adjust to the culture where you are. There's plenty of pregnant women in India who have very many healthy births, right?
Of course.
And
of course,
so,
you figure,
right? A billion people.
Of course, that's true.
And there was a lot of skepticism within the, my mother-in-law, to decide to give birth. But at that time, the U.S. government did not have paid maternity leave. We only got 6 weeks of sick leave. It didn't change until I think it was 2018 or 2019. Yeah. So I really had no choice as a new employee, right?
Right, you leave, you're gone.
Right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to keep working my job, and took my 6 weeks of sick leave when he was born, and it worked out fine. He's a healthy 15-year-old now.
That's beautiful.
We did do some creative work after he was born to continue my leave because we were doing, again, it was a new consulate. We have to still do a lot of construction. And we wanted to extend the construction time period, not just work hours, but at a U.S. government facility, you have to have an American with a clearance there the whole time. So when my son was 8 weeks and I had exhausted my leave, for the next month, I'd go into work at 4 p.m. with my son to watch the construction crew.
You had to actually be there.
Yeah, we had to actually be there because we had to have a cleared American.
How big of the place did you build? Did you set up?
So we only had 19 Americans, and I think we had about 60 local staff.
Okay.
So we were in an old palace for one of the princes of the area that had been we leased that.
So you're just
renovating it.
Okay.
And then just last year they finally opened a purpose-built facility. So construction takes a long time.
So they moved out of the palace.
Moved out of the palace to the new facility last year. It's beautiful. You could look online.
Now, whenever we have a facility, or whenever we have an embassy there, is that considered our property?
So it is our property, but I've never really delved into the legal ramifications of like
because if
people
want
something happens.
you're right, they want asylum or whatever.
Yeah, I've never really delved into that.
Do we have any Americans there in the area that you're in that were living in the area?
There were a number of Americans there, and working at the tech companies, and also a lot of children of Indians who had gone to the United States to work for a while, LPRs, H-1Bs, legal permanent residents or work visas, and had, life happens, you have children there, and children come back. So we did have a sizable...
children come back as Americans.
As Americans, it's great about America.
And we still do that, right?
And we still do that.
If
you're born in America,
you're an American. And a lot of people don't realize this either, that the only way you can lose your American passport is if you go there and say that you don't want it.
Yeah, you have to renounce.
You have to renounce it. Unless you renounce it, you're going to keep it.
Yeah.
And you have to pay taxes.
You have to pay taxes. Right of citizenship.
But they say they're about to change that too.
I've seen different...
They're doing it. They're
who
starting
knows?
to change things now.
Congress can change things.
I think we're the last of 4 countries. I think they still have people, citizens pay tax and they're not living
also
there.
maybe last of 4 countries with the non-metric system, right? So
that's true too.
We have a lot of funny things in America.
Still on the left side, right? Still on the left side, you're right. That's true. Yeah. But all of it was done. The way we set up the whole number system as a whole, the way we set up a calendar, the way we do all that. We could have picked any number.
We could have picked anything.
Any number, but we decided to do what we did, and didn't make sense with the calendar, so we did 12 months, and then we said 30 to 31 days, except for in February. We decided to add a day every 4 years, which, come on.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah, it is, and it's changing all the time, as our weather does.
Yeah.
So what do you find pleasure in doing when you're at the embassy in your job? What things did you find joy with?
What do I enjoy? I enjoy finding solutions to problems.
What are the kind of problems you get?
There's really small esoteric ones, like for instance, the key fob that you use to get in your car in Japan operates at a different frequency than the rest of the world.
Well, why do you have to deal with that?
Because it ends up being modifications that U.S. auto exporters have to make to their key fob when they export cars to here. And so,
that's under your realm of
even little tiny technical things like that come
I thought you're economics.
Well, it's part of economics and trade and going back and forth.
You have to solve the problems so they can trade.
Yeah, so we've been working for a while with the Japanese government to figure out how to do that. You have to study it and talk to all the stakeholders involved, and I think we're on a path to actually, this has been over a decade that me and various predecessors have been working on it. So
why? Because why? The U.S. didn't want to comply or something?
No, it's just complicated, right? There's different stakeholders, like there's radio operators who might use a frequency or national security reasons. You have to study all the people using the frequencies to make sure you're not disadvantaging somebody else.
And giving access to something else, right?
And build consensus for a change. And make sure that if Japan is going to do a new thing, it's not just the US standard, but the global standard, because otherwise some other country might say, okay, well, you changed to the US, why can't you change to ours, right? So working on, technical things like that. And then there's bigger things too, like, how do we make sure that we have the US and Japan working complementary in third countries together? So like we launched an Open RAN Academy. So that's a technology, a new 5G plus technology for how your cell phone operates and other advanced technology things. And so we launched that together in the Philippines to try to take this new technology to different countries outside of the US and Japan. And The Philippines was really receptive to having this academy there to study it, and that's been really exciting
The
too.
5G is not out yet, is it?
It's being developed.
It's being developed,
yeah.
but
Like
it's
so,
not really-
yeah. There are a number of companies that do, whether it's 5G, the full stack. You know, they do
Right.
nuts to bolts, or whether they do this Open RAN, where a government can choose components. So it's being deployed.
Okay.
So
Because I don't think people are on fire. We're starting to. What are some of the bigger challenges you come faced with? in what
You know, the business community, particularly in Japan, wants stability. And we've had administration changes in both the US and Japan. And, you know, we have to deal with how those changes affect the business community and make sure that we communicate well what the new rules of the road are, so to say. So I think good communication is really important as we go through changes.
Japan's been hit hard really financially.
Japan has had, I mean, you know, I came here as a girl in 1989, the bubble burst. Nobody had known it yet.
They didn't know. And
they didn't know.
I told my wife, as long as you hear people saying fakeki, it hasn't hit them yet.
Right.
When they stop saying that, they're hurting.
Yeah. So.
And it lasted for about 2 years before they stopped saying fakeki.
Yeah. So it was really, it's been interesting how, you know, the economy here, I've heard a joke, there's the rest of the world, Japan and Argentina. So I don't know if that's true.
Why Argentina?
You know, I haven't really studied the South America in there, but that was one, they've had a lot of...
Are they booming? Are they about to boom? Do they have any external debts? They must have a lot of debts.
It's been up and down there too, just like Japan.
But Japan has no external debts.
So it's very interesting. All the savings is domestic, right?
The thing is, and everyone
it's
owes
totally
Japan.
Different, which is why you know Japan is different. I think
it's completely different, and people don't realize that. When I used to do business in China, when they just opened, I was in the scanner business. I was buying used CT scanners here in Japan and selling to other countries. And the last country I sold to was China. And when I went over there, when they were developing, all the cranes had the name of the company on there. Mitsubishi,
right.
Sumitomo. Everything, I'm saying, what? All these were Japanese companies, and then in small print, you'd have a Chinese company.
Underneath. Since COVID, supply chains have been really a fascinating topic, and I think with global trade, people haven't really fully internalized how global our supply chains are. You can't just change things. Everybody's invested everywhere.
They are. It's so interconnected.
Yeah.
But then after that,
but then we all have to play by the rules.
That's true.
Right?
You have
know,
to,
if you need the global trade rules.
But still, the way human beings are now, you still have to deal with the person that has the greatest power.
Yeah.
Because they're the biggest threat.
Yeah.
Regardless if they like it or not, we're the biggest threat. Because if we decide we want to expand, we make it look different, but we're still doing the same things.
Well, I hope that we don't attack people.
So do I. I hope we don't either. I love my country.
Yeah. It's a great country.
Yeah,
it's why I chose to serve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we have
beautiful.
positives and negatives, but
who
on the whole, right, everybody has positives and negatives.
Who doesn't? And if it weren't for my country, I wouldn't be able to live here the way I live here, because I couldn't see myself living here another way. There's two types of foreigners in Japan, those surviving and those thriving. This is not the country to try to survive in, I'm afraid to say. Unless that's what you like. It's not the kind of country to survive in, because you don't have people. It's not kind to foreigners that are surviving. That's what I can say.
Social net not there. I mean, we're sort of exempt from all those types of things.
But you can see it from out there. It's just not there. It's not set up for that. You either fit the norm or you don't. If you don't, you're going to be there.
Outside.
Yeah. There's not a lot of room for the minority.
Here.
Yeah. In the U.S., that's all we talk about is the minorities. The majority goes, well, give me a break. I'm here too. So do you ever see, so you're leaving, how much longer do you have in Japan?
We have about 6 months left. So our next assignment will be actually back to India, New Delhi.
Is that on your husband's end this time?
Both of us.
Oh, that's right. That's how it works now.
Yeah. So we both had jobs at the embassy when we came here, and then I was able to extend my job so my son could finish high school.
That gave you how many years then?
That gave me a total of 5.
5 years. That's the most you can do?
That's the most we can do, maximum. And then my husband switched to a Washington, D.C. job, but teleworking from Japan. So a little bit of a, experiment post-COVID and workplace flexibilities. We're, reevaluating that now as a government to see if that was a worthwhile experiment or not. But for the last 2 years, that's been great for us to both continue to be together where our jobs are. And then we both have traditional in-person jobs at our next assignment in New Delhi.
Traditional in-person?
In-person. We're both working in-person at the embassy. Like, nobody's teleworking or doing...
Okay.
Yeah.
So but your job's going to be the same that you have here?
So I'll be, again, in the economics unit focusing on energy issues, because there's a, as you can imagine, India has a ton of energy needs with such a growing population. And then my husband will be in the consular unit, which is his specialty, so visas and American citizen services.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Pam, I really appreciate you doing this. There's a question I'd like to ask everyone before I end the podcast. There's a question I'd like to ask, and that is, if you could go back in time and meet the younger Pam and give her advice based upon what you know now, how old would that Pam be that you went to visit, and what advice would you give her?
I don't have many regrets in life. I'd probably go back to the Pam of like 2006, 2007, which was when I was having my first child. And I would tell her not to stress out about the decision to go to work or not to go to work, that life has many paths and you can always take whichever path and go back and do it. And I think I made the right choice, but there was a lot of stress at that time about what I was going to do and what my next
When you felt, you didn't want to go to work, or was it that you really just loved being with your child?
So I did want to go back to work because after about 3 months home with my child, I was reading him The Economist out loud. And
that's not bad. It's
not bad. And then, but so many of my friends who were new mothers were talking about feeling guilty of going back to work, and I didn't feel guilty.
Okay.
And I felt like maybe there was something wrong with me because I didn't feel guilty. But no, everybody just makes their own path in life.
True. That's so true.
And so, I didn't have to worry about, am I a little bit of a weirdo that I didn't feel guilty going back to work? So
it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
That's
it worked
beautiful.
out. My kids still love me. I love my kids.
That's beautiful. Yeah. You had boys too.
All boys. Somehow I went from, one of 3 sisters with, my mom, although one of 7 total, to a mom of 3 boys. So
that's beautiful. Are they close? Great. Are your boys close?
Yeah, they're really close, and it goes.
How many years between the oldest and the youngest?
It's 2.5 years. 5 years between the oldest and the
that's
youngest.
Not bad.
So
that's
2.5 years and 2.5 years basically.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah, we just kind of popped them out, but only ever had one in diapers. That was good. Always potty trained the first one before the next one was born.
And the other one could start helping anyway as they got older.
Yeah, and especially when we came to Japan. The oldest one could do a lot of babysitting because kids are so much more independent here than in other places. So that was really, our nanny was kind of sad to lose the overtime, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
But she's worked with us for 15 years.
Thank you so much, Pam.
Thank you. Pleasure.
I want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast, and never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.